All right, we are back with a recap episode of what went down this past weekend at the Javelina 100. Maybe we'll get into some 100K stuff as well here with friends, colleagues, Leah Yingling, Jeff Colt. Leah, I just saw you this morning in a cold, rainy, windy Liberty Park workout. Have you recovered from that? How are you feeling right now?
Oh, I told Mike the second we left, I was like, why is Finn so good at road workouts? And Finn, I want to know why.
If only it could translate to the sport that I love.
Yeah, we were saying that we're talking about how good Rachel is at road stuff. And then Mike's like, you know what? I'm not really built like a road athlete. He's like, you know what? But neither is Finn. And Finn is so good at this stuff. But yeah, I've recovered. I've warmed up. It was like our first really miserable day here in Salt Lake City. And we got out at 6:45 in the morning, but happy to have some buds to pull me along.
Yeah, we had a good workout environment this morning. We're on a roll with the Tuesday stuff. Jeff, how about you? How are you doing? A lot of changes in your life since the last time you were on the podcast.
Definitely. First off, kudos to getting out on this like 33-degree rainy morning. That's also what it was here in Carbondale. And I kind of looked outside and was like, well, this is winter, so let's lean in. And I did a bit of a speed workout this morning as well and was very soggy, but happy I did it. Happy it's behind me. In the last 8 weeks, bought a house, renovated a house, moved into a house, got married, throw COVID in there just for fun. A lot of big changes. As Coach Corinne Malcolm says, you've been leaning into adulting, which is good. You know, checking boxes in very big ways. But happy to report this is for me 3 weeks of consecutive training, which I haven't had since before June, I guess.
Wow.
Did my longest run on Saturday, pacing Jeff Mogavero since Western States. That felt good. I got pretty fired up out there. The atmosphere was fun. So
there was a video on Instagram. I think Debo posted it or the Free Trail account posted it, but like Jeff Mogavero is being like hoisted, off the premise because he's just so banged up, and you're just still fired up, like running ahead, like hooting and hollering. It's just like it was just emblematic of the day. It was perfect.
Yeah, the contrast there was pretty stark. We finally put Jeff in a chair, and Madison, his partner, like looked at me like, should one of us stay with him? And like, this is like a baby before they're mobile. Like, he's not mobile. We do not need to worry about him. Let's go pack up. We're good. And I like looked at him in the chair and just went back over to the finish line where the disco ball was and the DJ was, and just like danced my face off for a good 45 minutes while Jeff was effectively comatose.
Getting into the recap, Lee, I'll throw this to you first. Just high level instant reactions to the weekend. You were like as versatile as it gets, being on the live stream, pacing, celebrating. What stuck out to you this year?
Yeah, I went into the race knowing and feeling like it was going to be an amazing race to follow on both the men and the women's side. And it was exactly that, like start to finish, so dynamic, anybody's game all day long, people throwing punches, like coming back from the dead, a little bit of everything. And it just met all of my expectations, and had a busy day out there myself. I think I was on commentary from 5:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon straight, with one break to go run to the porta potty, and then came back and then hopped into pacing 30 minutes later. So it was about as action packed and fun filled as I could make it. But yeah, just an insane day of racing.
Do you feel like you're building stamina? Because was this your first time in the booth for that long?
Yeah, I did Hard Rock. I told people I felt like I was on a bender at Hard Rock this year, where I went from like out in the field reporting, but like Hard Rock is such a long race that it's just completely exhausting. It encompasses 2 full days pretty much. Whereas Javelina is actually quite nice from a commentary and pacing perspective. Like you get to go to bed that night by 11 if your runner is in like that golden ticket type position. And yeah, it actually wasn't too bad, honestly. This was definitely my longest stint in studio, and I have a blast in studio. I also like the field, but studio is a little bit easier from like a troubleshooting standpoint.
I will say, because I spent admittedly 13 to 14 hours watching the stream. It was wildly entertaining. Like you and Chris Brown, you and older Chris, and then Patty and or Skylar. Like it was entertaining. Jules and I watched from basically start to finish. I took one break to go exercise, get some fresh air, but I thought the live stream product was great this year. The set on site, I think, is so cool. I know in years past, Aravaipa has had stuff back in the Phoenix studios, and I love that. Like you could be talking, and then you could be looking behind you to get feedback of like David Roche or Riley running. That is so cool.
It was awesome. And shout out to Chris Brown. He had no internet the entire time he was on commentary with me. So everything, he was flying by the seat of his pants and glancing off of my laptop when he could. But yeah, he's a natural.
And then Jeff, coming to you, I'll just say one thing. So this was the first year I hadn't been at Javelina for 3 years. The previous 2 years I was there with mutual friend Brett Hornig, and in 22 he was in it all day. So it was so cool to be a part of a crew where, like, I mean, there was a small chance Brett was going to snag a ticket 2 years back. I think he ended up finishing fourth, and then we went back last year, high hopes. I think he got injured. So I've kind of experienced both sides of the coin where it's like your runners in it, your runners out of it. You were in the thick of it with Jeff all day. What was that like?
I also was on the live stream by myself from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. So you might not have watched that section, but if you want some...
I salute it, though. I salute it.
Yeah, if you want the B-sides...
1 a.m. to 3?
Yeah, we finished, finally got Jeff out of that chair, got back and ate dinner. I showered. I then drove back to the race and got there at like 12:30 and joined in to hang out with Patio and Skylar for a little bit, and then just rolled in. And I was supposed to be with Pete Mortimer, Pete's Meats, and he didn't show. So I was just there also with no internet, just like, all right.
So what'd you talk about?
I didn't know you were by yourself for that. That's hilarious.
We'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, go deep. I ended up getting the YouTube chat up, and there were like maybe 100 people in it, and just like every 8-10 minutes would try to reload results, and they wouldn't really load, and was just like, okay, this is pretty sweet. The day was amazing though. We got up at 3:45. We made our way to the race. I was staying in a house with the Missoula crew. So Aaron Clark and Jeff Mogavero both came down with their partners, Madison and Adam. And then Aaron had a friend, Evan, there crewing, and I was there crewing and pacing Jeff. The whole day. Yeah, Jeff Mogavero was in it. And I think a lot of folks didn't recognize that his chip wasn't really working. So there'd be times where people were like, oh, like so-and-so's in second, or Roche is in second or third. And Jeff Mogavero was pretty much in second the entire day.
Wow.
Sorry about my pup, but there'd be little jockeying for position where one runner would end up coming in just before him, but we pretty much left the Jed quarters in second every day. I'm going to throw it back to you for a minute, Finn.
Oh, sure. Well, I was just going to say, like, a huge salute to the 1 a.m. shift. I did the Cocodona live stream 2 years ago, and in that race, it's 5 days, 7 days, so there's so much time to kill. You have no choice but to rile up the live chat. And that's where the blimp came from. We started to fundraise. We got so out of topics, we started fundraising for an Aravaipa blimp. So again, that's why I was so curious to know like what you talked about in that 2-hour stretch.
Ended up finding these two runners, Daryl and Alex Crane, father and son, who were finishing together. I just saw like their trackers going together the entire time, and their mom/wife Michelle was in the live stream and like was calling out them, and they ended up coming to the studio and doing a short little interview, which was fun. But really just told some stories of our day. But so impressed with Jeff Mogavero. We had a plan to be the fastest crew in and out at Javelina headquarters. And for folks who haven't watched any of the live stream or seen, like, Javelina is set up really brilliantly. And I give major kudos to Jamil for how it is set up. But basically, there can be live coverage for this whole Jed quarters area, which when you come in, you have to run 400-meter kind of teardrop out and back. And that 400 meter section goes through Tent City. You pass everyone's crew tents and do a turnaround checkpoint at the start/finish and then come back out. So for that half mile, Jeff was doing his crew stops in roughly like 4 minutes. So from when he came into like the aid station, he was running half a mile, getting all of his crew swap like changed over, iced down and everything, and back out in a 4-minute window, which we were stoked on. It was like incredibly efficient. He had the same, I think, strategy that David had, that Dan Green had. Raj actually was a little bit more conservative to start.
Yeah.
The strategy was like, let's bank some time while it's cool and run 7-minute pace. And then when it gets warmer, let's try to cool as much as possible. And there's some great live footage of Jeff flopping around in the kiddie pool, cooling down at Jackass Junction. Our day fully came down to that 4th lap where he was still in second coming in to start his 5th lap. Raj was 20 seconds back. Dan Green was a minute back. And so he left that 4th lap. He didn't have a pacer on lap 4. We did. I ran with him on lap 5. He left in a pretty non-compliant state as a runner. I was like, Jeff, can I ask you questions? And he said, no. And I was like, okay. Well, you need to run the pace I'm running. And then time and time again, he'd be like, Jeff. And I'd look back and he'd be like 40 yards off my back. And he'd be like, come back here. I'd be like, this isn't going to work out for us, man, if we keep this up. And it kind of, without his tracker working, we didn't know how far back Raj or Dan Green were. We didn't know how far back we were. I was occasionally getting texts from Madison saying like, looks like David's slowing down a good bit. It's like, that's great information, but we have also slowed down a good bit. And yeah, everything kind of came together at Jackass Junction with 10 miles left. Dan Green came into the aid station with his crew, Alex, when we were running out of the aid station, and they didn't stop. And they were 20 yards back on us, running 7:15, 7:30 pace. And for the next 20 minutes, they were 20 to 30 yards behind us, running 7:15 pace. And we were running as fast as, Jeff could. And like, not one of those like, oh, we can hide from them situations. Like the second the sun started going down, all 4 of us turned our headlamps on. It's like, let's make sure we have every advantage we could possibly have. And, in that final 10 miles, I think Jeff closed 9 minutes on David and he put a 4-minute gap on Dan Green.
Yeah.
He did the deed.
I have so many questions about Jeff, especially in those last 10 miles. But Leah, first to you, I am, as somebody who has tried to do media and then hop into a pacing job, it famously was disastrous. Caleb dropped me at Western States 3 miles into my section with him, and that was the most irresponsible thing I've ever done. But you did 9 hours, 10 hours of media, and then you hop into Riley's crew and you are pacing them that last lap. Like, talk about like that transition and what it was like entering into that crew scene.
Yeah, it was 11 hours, and I 100% agree with you, Finn. Like that's some of the hardest transitions in ultra and trail running, like support, that I've ever had to do, is that style of transition, because you're just depleted mentally and also physically. So Chris and I were watching the clock because he was going to be pacing Aaron, and then I was pacing Riley, and we were talking in studio about how like we were going to be enemies once we got out on the course, because he was going to try to catch us, and we were just trying not to slow down so they wouldn't catch us. But I think we got off the mic like 30 minutes before our pacing duties, and Riley's awesome. I told them when I was pacing on that last lap, like I loved the approach that they had for Javelina. It was such a no frills crew. It was Riley's parents, and I told Riley that on the last lap. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a great setup. It's not a ton of energy. You don't have like 6 people attacking you when you come into the aid station. It truly feels like bare bones, but everything's getting taken care of because their mom and dad always always take care of them at the races and are always crewing and supporting. So they know exactly what they need to do. And that was exactly what happened when Riley came through 30 minutes later. Like, we were out, like you said, Jeff, similar to how Jeff was, like, in a minute. And at that point, Riley was in the lead, I think was leading wire to wire the entire day. The gap was kind of consistently increasing ever so slightly. So in the middle of the day, Riley had upwards of like 9 minutes of a gap. And then coming into lap 4, obviously when we left together, we didn't know where Hannah was behind us. And like, service on the course and the mobile live site for tracking is really tough sometimes for anybody that has used it. So I texted Brett before we went out and I said, will you please text me updates of what's going on behind us, because it's going to be too tough for me to try to check the link. So I got my first update from Brett after on our way to Coyote Camp, and he had said that Riley and I had, I believe, a 12-minute lead on Hannah. And then by the time we reached Coyote, no, we had 16 minutes. We had about 16 minutes at headquarters. And then when we reached Coyote, it was 12. And I was like, shoot, we just lost 4 minutes on that climb. Like, who's to say we're not going to lose another 4 minutes every, 4 to 10 miles here. So we need to put our foot on the gas.
Yeah. Do you think, where does their time fall in the historical marks? Like, is it second fastest, third fastest?
Second fastest time in history. Okay. And that was something that I knew going into the last lap. Like, one of the benefits of being on the commentary team is I know so many splits, I know so many times, and like, they're embedded in my brain. And one of the things I knew 2 historical splits and, well, 2 historical data points. One of them was the fact that in 2022, Riley had run 3 of their 5 laps in 2:57, 2:58, 2:59. So I knew with full confidence that Riley could run a 3-hour lap on that last lap. And when we left headquarters, we left around with about, like, I think 11:15, 11:17 or so. So I knew leaving there that if Riley ran a 3-hour lap, like I knew they were capable of, that we would go under Heather Jackson's time from last year. I knew that Heather had slowed a lot on her last lap last year. So I knew that if Riley could just stay consistent, that they could do that. I also knew that Camille's course record, I think, was 14:03. So I knew that Riley would have to pull out a very fast lap for the pace that they were going to get that course record. So I knew the course record was kind of out of reach, but not impossible. But I knew that that second fastest time ever was definitely a good carrot to be kind of hanging out front.
Jeff, I know you mentioned the battle with Dan Green, but was there ever a recognition during that last lap that, Jeff was also gaining time on David? Was he trying to see if magic could happen there, or was it really just focusing on like that second golden ticket?
I wanted there to be magic to happen there because I do think a lot of folks, like with David's performance at Leadville, expected him to have a pretty huge performance at Javelina, and he did. Like, he was incredibly consistent all day. I do think Jeff would have really shook the world had he actually caught him. It unfortunately, like the first half of that last loop, we were running like 8:40s to 9:30s, and it wasn't really in the cards. I tried to, kind of spark that fire a little earlier, but once like the real recognition that he was about to lose the golden ticket after running 90 amazing miles, once that set in, he was like, all in. I know we ran 7:02 pace from Jackass to the finish. I think from the final aid station to the finish, we were like 6:47. I was doing everything I could to like fire him up and piss him off. And I knew he was not appreciating me in the moment, but maybe retrospectively he would. But yeah, the overall win, I think, was a little too far of a reach. He would have had to lead that 5th lap, like from Jackass, or from the headquarters, feeling awesome. on Riley was a metronome. Riley ran so smooth and consistent all day. More so than maybe anyone in the entire race. And wild to see just the Riley come through, and then Hannah and Aaron were neck and neck being crewed out of the same tent. Once we crewed Jeff, we hopped over to help out with Aaron, and the gap behind Riley kept growing, and it was because they were slowing, and Riley was just so steady. So to hit that basically 8:40-ish pace, lap 3 and 4, super hot. Folks probably know this, but it got upwards of 99 degrees. There's no shade in that part of Arizona other than the tents at the kind of base area there.
It's oppressive.
So it's intense, so oppressive.
Yeah, something that I did think was interesting out there, and Jeff, I don't know about your experience, but Riley and I have run together a handful of time. I think mostly at Western States training camps, and then they came out to Salt Lake, and we shared a few runs there in the past. But honestly, could count on one hand probably the times that Riley and I have run together. And I asked them as we're entering the last lap, do you want to know things that are going on behind you? Because sometimes, if you haven't run with this person often, you don't exactly know what they want when you're out there. Do you want me to tell stories? Because honestly, if you want me to tell you stories, I'm not really the gal for you. I'm there to support, tell you, give you some positive affirmations, and then give you some splits and data that I know you can hit, and that can be motivating you late in a race. So I think those dynamics are always interesting, especially when your runner's in a position leading the race, chasing a golden ticket, just knowing exactly what it is that can get them to that finish line as fast as possible is sometimes a little tough.
I totally feel you there. And for me, there was this great added pressure because Jeff has paced me twice at Western States now. And last year I had a pretty hard Western States, but 2 years ago, his pacing was impeccable. I think we averaged 7:42s from Forest Hill to the river, and that's what we were trying to do. And cool. He was so perfect that I was beforehand, I'm standing next to Ryan Thrower and this CTS coach, Addison. I was more nervous before pacing Jeff for lap 5 than I think I've been for any race I've run.
How come?
And one, we knew that after lap 3, he was 11 minutes behind David, and we were standing there and it was 17 minutes. Okay, we still don't see him. And then it was looking at the splits, he had been kind of 13, 14 minutes at the last aid station behind David, and Roche was 18 minutes behind David. So we're if we're coming up on 18 minutes here, we're about to see both runners. And Roche is incredibly fast. Not someone I want running down me on the final lap of a course. I'll say the same with Dan Green now that I know more about him and have seen his engine. But yeah, I was he has put so much into this, and if I can't effectively pace him to a golden ticket when he's starting the lap with me in second, effectively that's just a failure on me. I was so nervous. And I I asked early on, do you want to know information? And just pretty deadpan.
Yeah.
He was in the pain cave. I tried to make a joke with him at one point. Said, dude, I just got a text from Courtney. She invited us over. She's hanging in the pain cave. And he was Courtney texted you? And I was oh God, I'm sorry, dude. Forget about it. Just keep running. So yeah, that dynamic, we've hung out, again, maybe 7-8 times over the last 10 years, but we don't know each other super well. It's fun having Jeff as a teammate, fun sharing a name with him. And we go all the way back. We shared our first ever ultra at the Vermont 50 in 2015.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
Pretty catastrophic for both of us, but it was a great experience. So, I feel he's definitely one of my kindred spirits, and I've seen the work that he's been putting in this fall. So there was no surprise, I haven't been playing free trail fantasy this year, but like Jeff was my lock for getting a golden ticket. I was pretty sure that David would win, but I was more sure Jeff would get a golden ticket than David winning, because there's always that odds of David, pushing it too hard too early.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was definitely felt that. I think the men's race and the women's race for the 100 were so tight. There were so many people in it the entire time. I think the third place finisher, was it Laura or Lauren?
Lauren.
Thanks. Lauren and Dan, I think, surprised a lot of people. I think Lauren might have been in 5th going into that last lap.
Yep.
And chased down, 3 and 4.
Well,
full race, and so fast to see like the 20th place finishers still coming in under 15 hours. And so you're just like, this race is crazy.
Leah, you mentioned this in the preview episode, acknowledging that Riley has the fastest time in the women's field historically at this race. So there's just a level of respect that you give them heading in. Like, they are probably primed to have a good day. I think I said in our preview episode that I'm not sure about Jeff. Like, if you look at his UTMB index, back-to-back broken arrow 50K podium, pretty good result at Sears and all, has had a decent day at UTMB before, pretty versatile, like in the mountains. But I wondered, like, would this translate over to more of a sprint like Javelina? And obviously it did. Jeff, where do you put this Jeff? How do you categorize him in terms of like the current talents in our sport? Like, what tier runner is this guy?
Jeff's a phenomenal runner, and I think he did have his breakout race. He's been looking for a golden ticket since 2018, and he just got it in a pretty commanding way. Going out and running 7-minute pace those first 2 laps with David, and I guess JP was in the mix there for a little bit, but he wasn't afraid of anyone else in that race. He was confident he could win the race. From the get-go, I was pretty confident he could win the race. He did like a 36 or 38 mile flat training run earlier this fall. And like his reaction was like, that was so fun. I remember Aaron Clark telling me, like, Jeff, 100% of the runs he does are awesome. He's like, that was awesome. And she's like, maybe 70% of the runs I do are awesome. And that's on a good week. Jeff just has a ton of great energy. At the end of the day, we're not talking about having to run 450s, 5-minute pace. Like, I think his mountain fitness translates really well to longer distance. And I think Jeff's, having paced Adam Peterman to a victory, me to a pretty good top 10 performance, and then me to a pretty rough performance at Western States, he's seen, a good bit of that course, and he's still hungry for it. So I think Jeff is like a major contender for Western States. I think if he puts in the right training going into this spring, he's someone to definitely watch out for. Caleb Olson, like someone else that I think if he wanted to go run 1250, 1245 at Javelina, he could do. And he's also someone that does well in the mountains. Tyler Green's in that same boat. They're runners that have natural leg speed. They have this like kind of 7:30 metronome, like easy pace that they can just tap into. And they do a lot of mountain training. So I'm really excited that Jeff finally put it together. He was trying to run 12:30. That was hot. That was a really hot day. I fully believe he can run 12:30 on that course.
Totally. Like, I think too, when you take out the amount of time that the runners had to spend taking care of themselves, not that you wouldn't be taking care of yourself otherwise during a 100-miler, but you've spent an extra 1 to 2 minutes at most aid stations icing up. So 1 to 2 minutes times 3 or something per loop times 5 loops. That's 15 minutes. That puts you at 12:30.
Yeah.
Additionally, Jeff started with an ice bandana. he knows himself quite well. It was chilly. It was like 45, 50 degrees maybe. I felt at least at the start. He started full ice bandana, like fully prepped for heat conditions. And he's like, if it's over 60 degrees, I'm cooling. And that's like, he knows his body in that way. So I think he was taking it pretty seriously, and not necessarily just like a big mountain guy showing up and taking a crack at it. He was incredibly calculated.
Mm. Before we get into takeaways from the collective fields, Leah, do you have any other stories or notes from pacing Riley that you want to share?
Let me think. Gosh, it was just so impressive pacing Riley. One of the most amazing things. And I was doubting them a little bit the day prior when we were going into the race. I asked them what shoe they were wearing, and they said that they were wearing the Nike Vaporfly. And I said, did you do a lot of training in this shoe? And they said, I got it a couple weeks ago, and I've been doing a couple runs in it. I ran one run that's slightly more technical than this loop in Boulder, and like I feel good in it. So I had no idea what Riley had on their feet coming into after lap 4, and I had no idea like what they'd be wearing when we left for lap 5 together. And I looked down at their feet in our first mile or so. I said, did you change your shoes at all today? And they said, no, like the shoe's been great. And honestly, so impressed by that, like the fact that the confidence in that shoe to take them the distance, but then also not having to change your shoe at all on like a hot, wet day with like lots of conditions and like lots of little things that can get in your shoes and on like impacting your feet. So that was really impressive. Another impressive thing was Riley just went pure old school on that last lap and knew that there was some things that were inducing vomit and puke on lap 4, like gels. So we're on our last lap together, and I said, like, what do you want from aid stations when we get there? And they said, like, I just want a bottle full of Gatorade. I said, Gatorade? And I said, yeah, Gatorade. And Riley fueled most of lap 5 with just blue Gatorade. And I told them, I was like, that is pure Pennsylvania right there.
That is amazing.
Yeah, gym coach would be proud.
Yeah.
Jeff was also in full road super shoe with the on Cloud Boom strike with Dirty Girl Gators, which I was like, I think you might be the first person to pair this like super shoe with Dirty Girl Gators. It's pretty awesome.
I was looking at some of Mike's photos from the weekend, and his photos of Jeff are some of my favorite. There's one with like Jeff's hands like embedded in the sand at the finish line, just like fully gassed out of it, and like it just looks like a body there, and it's really cool because you'd be like, what is this sport? But I saw the one picture that Jeff had Gators on, and I was like, honestly, pretty good idea out there. You don't see a lot of like the top people in like the golden ticket contention ever wearing Gators, but honestly, anything that can save your feet a little bit in a race like Javelina with like little things getting in there, like I thought that was brilliant.
One last anecdote on Jeff, might not be the last, I can't make promises, but when we went out for that final lap, like I was basically calling ahead to runners, we're on your left, 2 runners coming up, and no one knew who we were. And like we'd pass by and people like, good job, Raj. Or they'd be like, there goes Cole Watson. And be like, neither of us are Raj or Cole Watson. One guy was like, that's Raj and Cole Watson together. And I'm like, we're both named Jeff and we're both wearing the exact same fit because I dressed up as him that day. It was pretty entertaining to like witness that. And then it became less entertaining. We came into the finish area and because his chip wasn't working at the last aid station and we were moving super fast, like no one knew we were finishing. There was no finish cam. No one was like out cheering. Like we didn't really get a response until we got to the final like 3/10 before the finish line. And then like Jubilee came over and she was like, is that Jeff McGavero? It's like, yeah, that's your second place man, Jeff McGavero. Like he just got it done. But yeah,
I don't know if you have ever watched Key and Peele before, but there's this famous segment, the Obama translator, because Obama's famously mild-mannered, and he doesn't want to say anything mean, but his translator will. So like you could be out there, like, put some respect on Jeff's name.
Yeah, for sure. And then Patty O'Leary came up to me and was like, Jeff, I had someone come up to me and say, it's such a bummer that Jeff Mogavero dropped out of the race. He looked like he was doing so well, but I just saw him like walking to the bathroom, in the headquarters. And Patty was like, oh, that's just Jeff Colt dressed up as Jeff Mogavero for Halloween. So I guess we were confusing some folks on that front too.
One last thing on Riley before we move on. So I pulled up their results, and it's been a wild season. Like, to think about the self-belief required to go to this race and be ready to not just get a ticket, but win. Like, they had a 9th place finish at Black Canyon, which, you could interpret as disappointing, a DNF at Canyons, a DNF at CCC. So to have a relatively tough season and then to come here at Javelina with all that in mind and win second fastest time of all time. Like, I just love that storyline of like, this sport is so fickle, it's so unpredictable, and not everything is lost, right? Like, you can redeem it at any time. So massive kudos,
Totally.
to right the ship.
Totally. And that was like, I think even after the bittersweet 3rd place finish last year, where they were in contention in that golden ticket, 2nd place spot most of the day, duking it out with Ragna. And then to have like just a really rough 5th lap. I told Riley when we were out there together in the last lap, I said, nobody out here does this better than you. And then I also told them, like, man, it must really suck to be this good at Javelina. And they were like, I think I got a silent response on that one, but that would just suck, because then you got to just like keep coming back every year and doing well at Javelina because you're just so good at it. But yeah, I did bring up Western States at one point during that last lap, and Riley said, I don't want to talk about that yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect segue. I think one of the takeaways, and it's not really a takeaway in podcaster fashion, it's just another question, but like, what are the pros and cons of getting a golden ticket this early in the process? Like, now, Jeff, Riley, the rest of them, Hannah, like, they all now have, 9 months to ruminate on this and to prepare. Like, Leah, I guess, what do you think about this? Like, do you think it's good? Like, do the pros outweigh the cons of this whole process?
I thought a little bit about this yesterday, because like, our Javelina golden ticket winners never do it. They do okay at Western States. They never do.
Never is a hard word when it's only been 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Or 3 years. So
Okay.
it hasn't been like fully field tested, but there was always that
Early
reputation
reports.
with Bandera too, right? And Bandera was actually a golden ticket race for like 6 years or something.
That's a good point. So you're right. Arlen Glick, he got 3rd place. He's the highest finisher, I believe, in recent years with a Javelina golden ticket winner. And then I think Heather Jackson, 7th place, Camille, 8th place,
John Ray, 9th
place. Yeah. So yeah, it's sometimes
top 10 finishes is pretty hard. I mean, I would actually put them as like, that's pretty damn good.
It's pretty good. We've also had a decent amount for the proportion of DNSs at DNSs or DNFs at Western States from our Javelina golden ticket winners. So it's hard to say. I think sometimes we say people that do well at Javelina, it might be a certain type of runner. I actually don't think the people who got golden tickets fit that bill of just being good at a Javelina. So I have full confidence in our set of golden ticket winners, like, that they will do well at Western States. Do I think like there's certain runners in there that might need to work on one skill set over one of their other skills to like really optimize their chances at Western States? Yeah, of course. I think David, for example, like, we've seen him on 2 like flatter, less technical courses. Like, do I think as he sciences the shit out of Western States next year that he's going to be like spending more time like on technical trails, getting up in the mountains, getting up high, and then transitioning, like doing some runs that double back that are a little bit flatter and faster? Yeah, because I'm sure he probably sees that as like a semi, like something that he doesn't focus on as strongly as he does the more runnable stuff, like he has been as of late. And then like Hannah, for example, do we see her moving away from more mountain style training and doing another Javelina style block, most likely. So I'm excited to see how these 4 people do, because I think they are all definitely contenders for the top 10, if not top 5 at Western States.
David's on record that he's in it to win it.
That's awesome.
I believe that. Awesome. I mean, he's got the fueling down. That's such a huge element of it. The heat training is clearly like working. I think David is certainly a contender to go to Western States and knock it out of the park. I think there's like a couple things I saw with like just watching the lead runners come through, missing like some key cooling, like these like little things. It's like, ooh, like, you know, that might, you know, at first lap, not taking ice, you know, something like that, at Javelina might pan out, but, you know, kind of missing that at Michigan Bluff or deciding not to get in the river. You know, these might be bigger issues translated on a harder to crew and harder to race course. To be clear, Javelina is the easiest to crew and the easiest to race course I've been at, bar none. Like, it's rolling hills on Western States. Every single hill that Javelina has, I would tell myself is flat. And like the crew setup is so dialed. Your crew doesn't have to get in a car and jump around and do all of these like logistical headaches that, like, for me, being out there all day, you know, I guess 5 a.m. to 6:30 or whatever, 6:50 when Jeff finished, I had no issues taking care of myself. And like, as a crew, I could also pace. There's like these lessons that certainly require some refining and learning. And Riley's been at Western States. Riley knows that. I think for Hannah has a amazing support system, and will certainly do the work to learn those. I would say the same thing about David. I feel confident in Jeff just with the amount of experience he's had there. I kind of put Jeff and Hannah in a little bit of the same boat as like, these are maybe a little bit more mountain, like versatile athletes who just shined pretty bright on a flatter course.
Totally. And I think something that this happens in our 100K races too, that are golden tickets. Like in a race like Javelina, say your stomach is turning on the 4th lap, you can kind of get away with things on the 5th lap just to get it done. But if you think about how that time translates to the Western States course, maybe for the men, that's like hour 10 and you still have 4 hours to go. For the women's race, like hour 10, hour 11, 12, like you've got 4 to 5 hours to 6 hours left to race. And like, that's opportunity and time where like shit can really hit the fan. And I think like that's kind of like getting to Forest Hill and feeling okay. But you've still got 40 miles to go. And I think that's kind of how Javelina translates in some ways to Western States. Maybe it's like getting to the river. Like you still have, 3.5, 4 hours to go.
Yeah. One of my other takes, but more questions, is especially after watching David's performance, which I was so impressed by. And I was saying on the previous episode, even though I doubted that it was going to happen, I was stoked that he was gunning for a ticket. And I am so excited that he's going to be in Western States because of what David has done in this 2-month span. And same with Riley, because Riley's coming off, they put work in at CCC despite the DNF. I no longer know what is sustainable in terms of scheduling in this sport. Like what does it mean to take time off between races? How many performances can you string together in any given stretch? I don't know anymore. And I don't know if either of you two have thoughts on this, but I'm just still processing what David was able to do between Leadville and Javelina. Like, even though he didn't get the course record, Javelina still ran one of the fastest times of all time in oppressive heat. I'm just blown away. I'm left like picking up the pieces of what I thought was like reasonable in this sport.
Yeah, I think one explanation I can think of is just we've got such a great emphasis on fueling right now. I think the ability to fuel after races, but then this also like inter-training fueling of, you're fueling your day-to-day runs, you're fueling your runs that are like an hour to 90 minutes now, whereas like that was unheard of years ago to be doing that. So I think we're seeing these runners be able to like stack the volume more sustainably, largely because of that.
I'd also throw out there, and to be clear, I have like the highest regard for Courtney Dauwalter, but I would say that like we can't just continue to put Courtney on a pedestal and say like, oh, that's only something Courtney can do. To say that David's Leadville and Javelina in 8 weeks is like, you know, kind of mind altering. Like, I think discredits just the amount of vert and the amount of like just actually really intense recovery that Western States requires, Hard Rock requires, and UTMB requires. But I think other people can do it. And I'm excited that David just, you know, showed such a valiant effort with Leadville and Javelina. We've seen some really amazing back-to-back performances. And I think we've seen some runners where you're like, wow, does it just feel like, you know, this person has done every race this year? And oftentimes like, yeah, they decided to race 12 times, you know, between 50K and 100 miles. And like, I think the fueling is a huge part of it. I think also just the like having the gumption to do it is another part. And I really appreciated David kind of giving that perspective of like, I'm a different runner than I was before Leadville. And now like I'm a badass and I got to tell myself that. And I got to fucking, excuse my language, I've got to like, you know, really like step into that superhero outfit and tell myself I can do this, because I got to think that Courtney does a similar thing, that Jim does a similar thing, that Killian has been doing a similar thing for more than half his life or whatever.
Yeah. And Jeff, I think you and I had a similar conversation this year on the way to the last day of training camp, just like the power of self-belief. And I think we were both reflecting on some of the best races that we've ever had. And those races were on the days where we truly believed like wholeheartedly that we belonged there and that like we were in contention. And I think we're seeing more people line up with that level of just self-belief and confidence. And I think we're seeing the results as a product of that.
Yeah.
I have this memory before Bandera, I think Scott Treyer was doing like the Chasing Gold little mini series. And he like asked me like, Jeff Colt, what's your superpower or whatever his Boston accent is. And I was like, Scott, I think my superpower is like believing in myself and like knowing that my community believes in me too, and like fully leaning into that. And he was like, that's my superpower too. Like, yeah, that's like, it delivers in a really big way. Yeah, I'm so fascinated by belief systems and athletes like who are, you know, religious, who are not religious, where they find their belief, where they source that from. Because I do think, you know, especially through track and field and then, you know, into ultra running, when you're out there, you know, this whole, it's 70% mental or whatnot, like it comes down to whether or not you believe you can do it. And like having to get past this major hurdle of there's no way I could run faster than 9-minute miles right now, all of a sudden to realize, wait, I'm running 7-minute miles. How did that happen? What needed to happen to cross that threshold, to cross that bar and enter into this different psychological state? And yeah, it's the deep philosophy of at least competition in trail running that I love thinking about.
Well, I buy all those explanations. I'll ask one more question, friend. Maybe Leah, to you first. Do you foresee in the near future that that athletes like yourself, Jeff, David, are going to have to be more selective with where they place their efforts? Or do you think because of the self-belief component, the nutrition, there's more A races available to us in a season?
I think we're going to see similar trends to what we're seeing right now, to be honest. I think like you have those runners, there's a bunch of different categories. Like you have the runners who chase their heart and do what's fun and do where they find like they're finding the most joy. We have these other runners who are consistently on the golden ticket hunt. But then we do have some of these runners who are really just trying to see how much they can sustainably get out of themselves. And maybe that's the goal of the season, is see how much I can do and like what my potential is there. So I don't know. I think all these different series that we have cropping up across each season kind of starts to dictate where we put our efforts. And maybe we see people start like throwing their hat in one extra race at the end of a season. But I mean, it doesn't always work out. I think we're talking about a couple scenarios here where it did. But I'm sure there's equal stories from the field that it didn't quite go their way.
Yeah.
Can we just acknowledge the fact, like, David's been doing this for over a decade, right? And he's always been incredibly talented. 50K has been his bread and butter, trail marathons, like bread and butter. And at least my interpretation is that he has just had way too much going on with swap and coaching so many the simultaneous boom of ultra running and learning that you can be better ultra running with a coach, and that swap is the most like kind of popular coaching platform. Like, he has been managing all of this for the last 7 or 8 years in a real way. The fact that he's able to like find the life balance now as a dad with a, pregnant Megan, and to have these two performances, like, that deserves a round of applause just for life balance and like finding, that kind of like synergy between Leah, cause you're coached, right?
Mm-hmm.
He checks in with every athlete every day.
Yeah. I'm coached by Megan, but like they do. Like, yeah, I mean, I texted Megan last week and I was like, I really need to update my log one of these days because it's been like 2 weeks. But if I were in there every day, like, she's in there every day.
Yeah. So like that's a huge lift. And I'm like, more than anything, I got very emotional at the finish, just being like, this is so cool to see this person who's had all of this talent that, like, kind of, who knows what happened with Hoka, but like, kind of step from this world of sponsored runner into, okay, the only focus is coaching, to be able to kind of re-enter the world in such a competitive,
that's inspiring. It's interesting you say that too, Jeff, because I think you and I both entered the sport right around the same time. And there's a lot of people out there right now who are like, I didn't know like David Roche could do that. Like, who knew he could, like, he had the speed, he had this talent. And I think it kind of speaks to how trail and ultra running is booming right now. Like, there's a lot of the population in the sport who did not see David in that, like, making multiple world's teams in like the 50K style distance. Yes, he's finally stepping up to the 100-mile distance, but I think if there's been anybody that's been paying attention, since the 2015, 2014, 2016 timeframe, like, what David's like top end is like, and it's pretty unimaginable. So it's really cool to see him taking that talent and apply it to the 100-mile distance this year.
Yeah, for a little while he had the like fastest time on Mags, which is like the CU Boulder training grounds. Like, that's like, okay, you're running faster than Adam Goucher, than Dathan Ritzenheim, than like these CU legends. Like, he's definitely got that top end speed. I got it personally. David and I've raced each other maybe 3 times, and he's beat me all 3 times. And I was out there being like, David is the person in front of me, and my runner might not be able to catch him, but I know I can, and I want to. And I like had this little like dog hunt in me where I was like, this is my chance to beat David. Jeff, you need to run faster. I'll put you on my shoulders. But so incredibly stoked for him. And yeah, I mean, all eyes should be on him, like, rightfully so. I also am stoked for the Adam Peterman, Jeff Mogavero, like Missoula training block going into states, and what those two guys can do together. Cause it's been cool seeing them on different podiums together. And they definitely have like a deep training partner, relationship that I think few of us have and many of us seek.
Mm-hmm.
Couple things on David. So the first one, Leah, you'll get this. It's super inside baseball, but 10 years ago, I believe the Jupiter Peak Steeplechase was a part of one of the short trail championship series. So I think him and Megan raced it on a Saturday. And then the very next day, he time trials the climb on Grandeur Peak, and his time stood for many years.
Yeah, so for years. And then, I remember looking into that and like clicking on it a couple years ago when I was doing a grandeur attempt. And I'm like, that time is unbelievable. And then I see his Strava that's like, yeah, like recovery from Jupiter Peak steeplechase. I'm like, what?
Insane. Yeah. And then we were talking on the run this morning, and I was scrolling through his Strava in prep for this episode, and there was a run he did 2 weeks ago, Jeff. It was 16 miles. It was like 640 average pace, and his heart rate was like 128 average. And so I'm telling Leah, like, I think David has one of the best aerobic engines in the sport, on par with Jim, Hayden, Adam. Insane. And what if, I mean, he's had success at the short stuff, but like, what if the 100-mile distance is like actually where he's meant to be on display?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like the one thing too, has been interesting about following David's training for the last year is like, maybe I should ask him himself and see if he finds like his runs glamorous or fun, but like David is training for the sole purpose of training. Like his runs all have a purpose, and it's not like he's like, I find myself skipping a workout or skipping a run because I want to go play in the mountains like 50% of the time. David's runs all have a purpose, and like he might be on the treadmill 50% of the time because that run that day has a very specific purpose for him. So he's somebody that just seems kind of like focused in that respect, and like we'll put kind of like the fun runs to the side and maybe for off season because like he's got a goal and that's in front of him and he knows exactly what he needs to do aerobically to like get himself there.
Two things on that. One is like, remember talking to Katie Scheid when she kind of switched coaches and started working with Coop, and was just like, yeah, like everything is intentional now. It's a little bit more boring, but everything has a purpose. And then also just going to Killian's training logs, and you're like, oh my God, like there's like, he finds, I think, felicity in running up steep stuff, but he's also running up steep stuff so that he can run the fastest vertical kilometer that any human is capable of, type of deal. And the intention behind it, like, I feel you on that, Leah, in my personal training. The other thing I wanted to throw out there was Megan, well, team swap, right? Coaches 1 through 5 on the women's side,
which is so cool. And
David won. So good day, team swap, for a race that is fully sponsored by CTS. Pretty impressive stuff. But that is a sidebar. Megan was coming over because she coaches Aaron, and like while Aaron was coming through, kind of talking and sharing a little bit about David, and like he is fully just going off heart rate and off exertion, and that's that fun side of Jeff that wants to play in the mountains also doesn't really use a heart rate monitor and doesn't want to kind of weigh myself down with metrics and too much information. But hearing that was just incredibly enlightening and telling of like, wow, if he's actually running a full 100-mile effort in 99-degree temperature off of heart rate, not RPE, that's remarkable.
Okay, I've got two more talking points that I want to share. The first one, because both of you have this experience. Jeff, you got a golden ticket at Black Canyon a few years back. Leah, you got it at Canyons a few years back.
Jeff got two golden tickets.
Got 2 golden tickets. Sorry. And you know, one of the things that Jules and I were kind of laughing about watching the live stream was how quickly you get approached by Craig. And can you guys talk about the behind the scenes there? Like, what does that conversation look like?
Yeah, this is funny because I was talking to Riley about Western States while I'm pacing them, and there's still probably 5 miles to go. And I think I had said, I was like, Riley, I think like the handheld and belt thing you're doing will be like a great setup for Western States. And that's when Riley was like, please stop talking to me about Western States. But what Riley did mention at one point when we were talking about Western States was they said, I can't wait to cross that finish line and apologize to Craig Thornley about vomiting on his course. Because Riley had a pretty tough day at Western States a couple years ago, which ended up in a lot of puking. But to your point, Finn, it's a really cool experience. I think you're, especially the first time, I'm sure, I mean, I bet you Jeff had some pretty good emotions both times, but you're soaking up the moment and you're really taking it all in. And here comes this golden ticket that's the size of me. and it's placed in front of you. And I know for me, like, it was one of the easiest questions to answer. But I know there's a lot of athletes out there who like come into a race and say like, oh, if I get a golden ticket, I don't know if I'm going to take it. But when Craig walks up to you, it's almost impossible to say no to him.
So I was that athlete both times. When I went to Black Canyon, and Finn remembers this because after Black Canyon was the first time we met and did an interview, but like to say I was a dark horse might even be an understatement. I had no thought in my mind that I would be able to get it.
Didn't pick you up. We thought Anthony was coming in.
Yeah, no one knew I was out there the entire day. I was like blown away by the performance I was having. I was using Chris Macco's splits from a year that the course was altered, and he texted me like, the night before the race being like, whatever you do, don't use those splits. And I was like, too late. So Annie had just torn her ACL like 4 days before, and I got like the okay to go to this race, but she was like, what's going to happen if you actually get a podium? I was like, we'll cross that bridge when it happens. Like, one of my best friends was getting married that day. Oh my God. My girlfriend was at home, drugged and with an ACL tear. And like, Craig came up to me and I was like, I'm going to need a little bit because I really don't know. I didn't expect this. And like texted and called my like dearest running friends and Annie, and they were all like, you'd be dumb not to do this. So I did it. Bandera, I had a really rough go the 2022 Western States doing it with COVID. Yeah. So that was the worst summer I've had. My recovery from that was just heinous. So when I ended up winning Bandera, Craig came up to me and I was like, Craig, it's super good to see you. I respect you so much. I'm not going to be able to give you an answer on this trip because after this last year and how much it took out of me physically, emotionally, and like mentally for the 2 months afterwards, I would be remiss to say that this is a personal decision and I need to consult like my partner, my dog, my parents, my siblings, my therapist, like all need to have some input in it. So I didn't take the golden ticket from Bandera. And yeah, like certainly went there with that in mind, but Western States, it comes with some pretty big side effects.
No such thing as a free lunch there. Yeah.
Yeah. Or a free race.
It's so expensive too. Like, yeah. I think that's something.
Rightfully so. It's a great race. It is a big cost. It's a nonprofit.
Yeah.
I'm not critiquing that by any means. I do think it's super cool. Aravaipa still pays for their golden ticket winners, right?
Yeah, they do, which is awesome. And I
Best
think
reason to do an Aravaipa golden ticket race.
Yeah, that's got to be repeated.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's pretty full of emotions, and like part of me wants to get another golden ticket so I can actually like have the gumption to say not this year. But a lot of runners out there say they're not going to take it and they end up taking it. And I would put myself in that category twice now.
So, by the way, I apologize for missing Bandera, but it actually raises a great question, which is, where are you on the all-time list of most golden tickets secured? And who is the leader? Like, who has the most?
Jim is maybe the leader in this golden ticket era.
Okay. Is it 3?
I think there's other people with 3 as well.
Jim has got to be at least 4.
Someone out there is screaming into the podcast.
I know
the answer.
Yeah, Liam, let us know. If you provide us this information, I'll send you a gift. Jim Gorges, Bandera, whatever the one in Nice Sonoma was last year.
Black Canyon? No, he's never done.
He didn't do Black Canyon. He did
Sonoma.
Yeah, Sonoma. He's got at least 4. But there's a couple athletes out there, I think, with 3. And I don't know what it was before the Golden Ticket Series, if it was Montreal Cup or how folks qualified. I'm not that much of a veteran.
I've got one more talking point from me, and then I'm sure you guys have a couple. But the first one is also kind of a question. So Dan Green, huge salute, but also, knocking at the door because 4th place last year, 3rd place this year, fighting hard both years. Narrowly misses it. And I guess my question is, who from both sides in the remainder of the top 10s, men's and women's, do you think will ultimately be getting into Western States? Like, who is going to take another shot, whether it's at Chianti or Canyons or Black Canyon? Like, who like Leah from the women's field, who do you think has the best shot?
Yeah, I think something Erin Clark said in her pre-race interview with the Mountain Outpost team was like she's getting her golden ticket hunt started early this year because she said it might take her a couple attempts. And like I liked her putting that out there, but but she was also lining up super confidently this year. Like she knows that she's put in like one of her best, like just consistent years of training that she probably has since she got into ultra and trail running. So I think she's somebody we will definitely see lining back up. We recorded with Lauren Puritz on the Trail Network podcast yesterday, and she had remarked that like it's going to be tough for her to line up again just due to kind of constant heartbreak. Like she got her golden ticket this past year at Black Canyon and then had a tough go, but then just like trying to figure out in her heart and soul, like, does she want to keep investing in the golden ticket hunt this next year? Because it's taxing. She does a lot of it without like her husband and kids there. And it just gets to be a big investment when like her soul might be elsewhere. So I think we'll also see Anna Loudon go after a ticket again. Becca Wendell, who was an early DNF, she's on the Black Canyon entrance list. So I think we'll see nearly everybody in the top 10, like at least top 6 on the women's side, line up again.
Yeah, I think Erin definitely came to mind for me. I think she'll go after it, and excited to see how that manifests. But I know the Missoula crew wants to bring a real force to States. I hope that Dan Green can figure it out. Like I know on the live stream as he was running in, he literally was like trying to say to the camera, "Sponsor me," so that someone would hear that. I certainly heard it. And Dan Green ran an amazing race last year and maybe a more amazing race this year. If it's any solace to you, Dan, I had 2 near misses before I got 2 golden tickets. And talking to Tyler Green, he also had a couple near misses before he got golden tickets. And, you know, my hunt was over 5 years before I got that first like ticket to States. And I feel that
Bandera.
Yeah, I feel that what Lauren was talking about, because you're like, I'm kind of committing like my whole season to this. And for Dan, who's not sponsored, like I think his best chance is Tarawera, but that's super far away and that's really expensive. Black Canyon's going to be really competitive, and Canyons doesn't give you a ton of wiggle room to mess up, right? Like it's pretty close to the race. Is he going to be at Western States in the next couple of years? Definitely. He paced Caleb Bowen, I think last year at States. He's seen the course. He's hungry for it. I had this like weird, like I was looking up my strength coach's run from rim to river in West Virginia, and like sure enough, come across Dan Green's name again because he's won it the last 2 years, and like he's an incredibly talented runner. So I think it is one of those situations of East Coast runners often getting overlooked when it comes to brand recognition and sponsorships, which sucks. And I think he's like rightfully got a chip on his shoulder, and I can't wait to see and support this like going forward. So Dan, I'm behind you.
He's also signed up for Cocodona, so there is a silver lining here.
That actually is what his crew told me afterwards. He was like, if he actually got it, he was going to try to do Cocodona and Western States, and that was going to be chaos. And so, yeah, Dan Green, Cocodona, you'll have me glued to the live stream.
Yeah, me, you, and Dan, and Courtney going after it, and Brian Sansfin.
Is Courtney doing Cocodona?
Yep.
She signed up. Breaking news. Well, kind of breaking news. She is signed up for Cocodona.
Yeah.
The women's field is going to be bonkers.
That's awesome.
The women's field is going to be insane. I mean, the men's field could shape up too, but like the women's field is going to be sick, I think.
So good. The only other thing I was going to call out is the 100K 1-2 overall, where ladies, we had Anne, just blanked on her last name real quick. Thank you, Flower, and Jane Moss taking 1-2, and incredibly good race. I think for a while looked like they were going to be on course record, but again, pretty hot day.
Yeah, and third place woman was 4th place overall. So 3 in the top 4, which is amazing. Just awesome.
I'm sure it's the same for Anna. Just knowing Jane a little bit from the Salt Lake City scene, I'm really stoked to see what comes from this and what her 2025 season shapes up to be, because she is a mega talent. And I don't know if
she's also on the Black Canyon entrance list.
Let's go. Okay.
Yeah. I think Anne might be too, actually. I should check
That's a great tune-up for Black Canyon.
Totally.
In terms of just like logistics, weather, like terrain, relatively similar. Black Canyon certainly a little punchier, but yeah.
Leah, before we go, any final thoughts or takeaways from you?
I just love ultra running. It was such a fun weekend. Like the whole thing, start to finish. Like sometimes I leave these weekends just purely tapped, heart and soul energy, like physically, mentally. Like I left this weekend so jazzed on the sport, just loving all the variety of storylines that came out of this. Just incredible. Plugging Riley one more time. Riley's time ended up placing them 8th place on the all-time 100 miles in North America, which is really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, Mike was trying to convince me to run a flat 100 sometime this winter here, and we pulled up the 100-mile all-time North America list, and I was like, oh my god, Riley's time would be top 10 here. So pretty cool to see, because I think that's on Javelina's course, which is kind of flat but also still has punchers. 100-degree day, can't imagine what Riley and the other the rest of the women's field would have thrown down on a completely pancake flat, not hot course.
I'll add, that's a really positive note. I'll add on a slight somber note, because these weekends are so rejuvenating to me. I am bummed that we have to wait until mid-February for another one of these golden ticket races.
And we just found out today that Rufa Grandeur Peak here in Salt Lake is the same day as Black Canyon, and Mike and I will unfortunately be missing it, but that's okay.
Also, a big shout out to Mike, who captured so many amazing moments at the race at Shit in the Woods. If you're not already following him, check it out. His photojournalism is incredible. Yeah, we had two sentences of communication during my 11 hours on the live stream. The one was I need food. Can I have a burrito? And he gave me half of his burrito, which was awesome. But then the other sentence was, I've got some bangers. And he was talking about the photos that he got that day, and he was really proud of them. So yeah, he puts in the work. Guys, I have a crying baby upstairs that I have to attend to, but this has been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you so much, Leah. Always a hoot.